welcome back to the channel. My name is Jeff. If you're new here, welcome. If you're a returning viewer, welcome back. And today I want to talk a little bit about a series of massive tomes that Otto Penzler has edited and put out through the Black Lizard imprint. Now I want to do a brief overview of this massive series that Otto Penzler, famous originator of the Mysterious Bookshop, an expert, acknowledged expert on crime fiction, mystery, detective fiction, and all other kinds of fiction, really, has put these together through Vintage and Black Lizard, which is an imprint of Random House. He has put out 15 of these massive tomes of compendiums of great fiction, genre fiction. Now, I have several here. I don't have the first one, the Black Lizard Big Book of Pulps, which came out in 2007 and is just jam-packed. It's 1,168 pages of double columned, small type, all kinds of pulp fiction. I don't have that one yet. I don't know why. I should have picked it up. I focus on some other things first. That has been put to the top of the Amazon wish list, and I'll be receiving a copy before too long, and we'll review that and talk about that in more detail in the future. But what I want to do today is kind of kick off a series looking at these different collections. So starting off chronologically, so the Big Book of Pulps was the first one. That was followed by the Vampire Archives, which came out in 2009, and that is 1,034 pages of crammed full of fantastic vampire stories. That one I also don't have. I'm planning to order that one soon as well. I do have the third one, the Big Book of Black Mask Stories, the Black Lizard Big Book of Black Mask Stories. Now, I've shown this briefly. I showed this back during PI July, and I talked about this as one of the possible choices for reading for PI July, and that was an event created by Jim at Mystery and Mayhem. Really fun event. I had fun reading some stories for that and some novels for that. I didn't read any of this, but I want to kind of show off this book. Now, these are all trade paper. Some of these came out, perhaps all of them at one point, or at least the first several, in hardback editions, which are much more expensive. These trade paperbacks are very reasonable, pretty well put together. The paper is, of a cheaper quality that is often used today. But I want to show you just a little bit of some of the way these books are laid out, right? With little chapter headings if it's a novella, or some cases a full novel. You've got this great cover with this tough gangster mall ready to throw down here, looks like. And Black Mask was, of course, a famous magazine that focused on hard-boiled detective stories. And that's where some writers like Dashiell Hammett and Raymond Chandler and Norval Page and a bunch of other writers, Carol John Daly and Lester Dent and Frederick Nebel, etc., got their, cut their teeth and came to fame. And there are some art here and there in these, like this one, right? Again, really nice, fat collection, other than the Vampire Archives and the very first one, the Big Book of Pulps. Those are the two I want the most. Now, the next in chronological order to come out after the Black Mask Stories edition is this one, Big Book of Adventure Stories, which came out in 2011, May of 2011. There were two editions of Big Book of, edited by Penzler, which came out in that year, 2011, and this was the first one, okay, 2011. The Big Book of Adventure Stories. Now, I showed this off before in my 10 favorite book covers video, which I did a little while back. The Big Book of Adventure Stories, right? The most daring, dangerous, and death-defying collection of adventure tales ever captured in one mammoth volume with this great Rafael de Soto cover, which probably was taken right off of a Men's Adventure magazine, and it certainly has captures all the vibe of Men's Adventure magazines here, and it's a good summation of this fantastic volume. This one is 896 pages, jam-packed with action adventure of all kinds. Fantastic volume. After that, there was a edition put out later the same year in September of 2011 called Zombies, Zombies, Zombies. In other words, the big book of zombie stories. Now, this one wasn't quite as thick as some of the others. The big book of Black Mass Stories was 1,136 pages, and the big book of Adventure Stories was 896 pages, and Zombies, Zombies, Zombies was 810 pages. But still, jam-packed, more zombie action than you could shake a stick at. And that was followed in 2012 by Ghosts, the big book of ghost stories. Now, some of these later ones still published through Random House. Here you'll see some of the, I'll show bigger pictures on the screen, but you can see the Zombies, Zombies, Zombies and Vampire Archives being advertised on the back, okay? And I talked briefly about this one way back in May in my introduction to Horror Mayhem. I joined a lot of events so far this year on my BookTube channel. Anyway, very cool collection of ghost stories. And then after that, in 2013, one of the slimmest volumes they put out were, and you can understand why it's a little slimmer, considering the more focused and kind of narrow topic, and that's the Big Book of Christmas Mysteries. Now, this is no longer going by Black Lizard. It's going just, oh no, it still has a little black lizard there, wearing a Santa cap. Do you see that? Santa cap on the lizard. Big Book of Christmas Mysteries, featuring unscrupulous Santas, crimes of Christmases past and present, festive felonies, deadly puddings, misdemeanors under the mistletoe, Christmas cases for classic characters including Sherlock Holmes, Brother Cadfael, Miss Marple, Hercule Poirot, Ellery Queen, Rumpole of the Bailey, Inspector Morse, Inspector Gautier, A.J. Raffles, and Nero Wolfe, among others. Nice, lovely kind of vintage cover. Now you might wonder, are there enough vintage or enough Christmas mysteries and detective stories to fill a book? You'd be surprised. There are a ton, and they're really popular subgenre right now. The British Library Crime Classics line, edited by Martin Edwards. He's put out at least 4, maybe more, short story collections of classic British mystery stories set around Christmas or around the holiday. And the same imprint has put out several novels that are set around Christmas. And there's a ton of them, actually. And they're selling very well. Okay, after the Christmas mysteries came the Locked Room Mystery. The Black Lizard. The Black Lizard title is back. It wasn't on the Christmas mysteries cover. They just said the little holly up here, the Big Book of Christmas Mysteries. But Black Lizard is back. The Black Lizard Big Book of Locked Room Mysteries. And this is a hefty tome also. And this is 941 pages. The Christmas Mysteries is only 654 pages. This one is longer and thicker and was put out and published in 2014. And of course, a subset of classic detective fiction is the Locked Room Mystery. How was the crime committed? How was the murder done when all the doors and windows were seemingly locked? And again, you got an interesting keyhole here on the back. And evocative cover on the front. This one doesn't have any illustrations that I could see, but it has the usual author introduction and double columned, blocks of text to cram in as much as possible. Again, the binding's pretty good on these. They hold up pretty well. They're a little floppy, but if you treat them okay, they're going to be fine. As usual, these big books are usually split into different categories, right? For example, the Locked Room Murders one, just to show one example, we have familiar as The Rose in Spring, which means most popular and frequently reprinted. And then we have This Was the Unkindest Cut of All, Stabbing in a Locked Room. That's quite specific. Several stories there, including one by Manly Wade Wellman, A Knife Between Brothers. That's a story I haven't read. I know he wrote a few mysteries and things for the pulp, so that'd be interesting to see. Footprints in the Sands of Time, baffling scenario that seem with footprints that seem to lead away or there, but how an end. And We Missed It, Lost Forever. Okay, so people disappearing. How do they disappear? How easily is murder discovered? Many ways for the creative killer to accomplish the act. Shoot If You Must, which has a Marjorie Allingham story, perhaps a Campion story. Shootings in a Locked Room. Stolen Sweets Are Best. So thieves stealing valuable objects from a locked room. One man's poison, Signor, is another's meat. So poison in a locked room. And one final story by Martin Edwards, who I mentioned before as being one of the editors of the British Library Crime Classics line. And some stories simply can't be categorized. So that's like a kind of hodgepodge, I guess, or the one that doesn't fit any other category. So those are the last of the ones that I currently have in my possession. I have 5 of them, but all told, we're looking at, probably 4,500 pages of stories, each one crammed anywhere from 45 plus to 75 stories per volume. Now, I have some others I haven't caught up with yet. Some of the next ones I'm going to mention, I would be happy to get and will eventually pick up probably. And then some I'm less interested in. So let me run through those. There were a total of 15 so far that I've been able to find that have been published by Vintage and Black Lizard of these Otto Penzler edited massive tomes of stories. So after the Locked Room Mysteries collection in 2015, the big book of Sherlock Holmes stories was released, and that's 816 pages. That's all pastiche fiction, Sherlock Holmes, people trying their own hand, including Stephen King, writing Sherlock Holmes stories. Now, I'm a big fan of the original Sherlock Holmes stories. I'm not so huge on pastiche fiction of Holmes. I have a couple collections like Sherlock Holmes in Orbit, which has some science fictional stories. And it looks like from perusing a bit of the reviews of this big book edition of Sherlock Holmes pastiche stories, that many of them have some kind of fantastical sci-fi horror or perhaps, oddball or weird elements to them. And that might be fun. I've read a few. I have a Gaslight Arcanum collection somewhere around here that has Sherlock Holmes stories, Sherlock Holmes dealing with ghosts and the supernatural, which of course he's a fervent disbeliever of. So I sometimes like to read those, but I don't know if I need a big collection like that. But it's out there if that's your kind of thing. Next, they did the big book of Jack the Ripper stories, and those were that collection was published in 2016. So again, almost every year, one of these big suckers was coming out. And that one was 848 pages of stories, of course, revolving around the infamous Jack the Ripper killings. Again, probably some cool stories in there. I don't know if I need that in my own personal collection. And then after that, the 11th book in the series, I guess if you want to call it a series, it's a series of these collections anyway, the Big Book of Rogues and Villains. And that was published in 2017, and that is 911 pages. And as the title suggests, this is a set of stories, a massive set of stories focusing on rogues, perhaps some anti-heroes in there, as well as just out-and-out rogues, scoundrels, rascals, and of course, villains. I'm sure there are heroes going up against the villains. I don't have this one. Not sure if I will get this one, but it looks interesting. Okay, a few more. This one I do want to get, number 12 in the series. This came out in 2018, and this is the Big Book of Female Detectives. Now, this is a massive one. This is back to big size 1,115 pages, crammed full of female detectives doing all sorts of adventures and investigating things. And again, Penzler takes his time to put together this kind of sections, categories for these different stories in each of these volumes, which is cool. And he also gives a very interesting, brief but interesting introduction about the author and some of their works and life history. Anyway, the female detectives one is set up in a similar way. Very, very early ones, Victorian, Edwardian, pulp era, modern era, where you'll find most of this, the Sarah Paretsky's and the, Sue Graftons and things like that. And then a kind of female villains part at the very end, kind of female femme fatale type. That one sounds interesting, and so does the next one. The 13th one that was put out in 2019 is the Big Book of Real Murders. Now, it doesn't mean real as in R-E-A-L. It's R-E-E-L. These are stories that inspired movies, Hollywood movies or likewise. And this one is massive at 1,200 pages. It takes the cake for the biggest, thickest of these big book collections. And then we move on. The 14th one, the next to last that's been released so far, the Big Book of Espionage. So all, as it sounds like, all espionage stories. And that came out in 2020 and was 832 pages long, or is 832 pages long. I don't have that one. I would be interested in getting that one. Should be some cool stories in there. And finally, the 15th and final so far of these Black Lizard vintage crime big book collections edited by Otto Penzler is the Victorian Mysteries, the Big Book of Victorian Mysteries. Came out in 2021 and is 640 pages. So as you can see, a lot of stories, a lot of text, a lot of paper, and a lot to collect. Altogether, we're probably looking at, I didn't do the math, but we're probably looking at, 12,000 pages plus, 13,000 pages of stories. Now, there might be a slight overlap in some of these. I think he tries pretty hard not to have too much overlap, but I have read that maybe the Big Book of Espionage might have a story that appeared in another collection. The ones, other than the ones I have, the one I'm going to be getting next and will eventually get around to talking about is the very first one, the Black Lizard Big Book of Pulps. And I'm the very first one that kicked off the series. How I don't have that one, I have no clue, but I'm going to get it soon. They're a little more expensive here in Japan online, but they're pretty reasonable, and most of them are still available, I believe, with new copies, not just through the Amazon Marketplace or whatever, in North America and other places. Highly recommend these. I'm going to be back to talk in more detail about each of the 5 volumes that I currently own. I'll probably do a kind of loose series on these, maybe one every month talking about. And the first one I will talk about in more detail will be the Big Book of Adventure Stories. But for now, that's my shelf tour of these cool tomes, massive tomes. And, some of these will be in hardback if you wish to pony up some extra cash. But these trade papers, or whatever you want to call them, really well put together, nicely bound. Some of them having some pretty cool art inside. Most of them do not, but the first couple of them do for sure, especially Black Mask, and I think the Pulp one does as well, the Big Book of Pulps, which has a variety of stories, not just hard-boiled detective stories, but all kinds of adventure and crime stories. I think mostly focusing in the crime realm, but that one looks just fantastic. So I'm going to be getting that one before too long. Anyway, if you have some of these books or read some of these, again, they're not something that you're going to sit down and read in one sitting, probably. Most of the Goodreads reviews that I've scanned about these books in the past or recently show that most people take a month or two to get through them, sometimes a year, year and a half. If they're, just like me, I don't really like to take up any kind of anthology that no matter the size, whether it's a couple hundred pages or 1,200 pages, and read it straight through. Usually I'll read a couple stories here and a couple stories there, and I like the fact that there's stories I've not read in it I can go back to and read in the future. So that's it for now. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope everyone is doing well and enjoying your reading, and I will see you back soon on this channel with another video. Thanks a bunch. See you later.